Dark-skinned Native American. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. If you're passionate about uncovering hidden truths of history, hit subscribe and join our journey of discovery. The time has come to uncover this hidden chapter of history, not just to correct the record, but to understand how the systematic erasure of these dark-skinned Native Americans has shaped our modern understanding of race and identity in America. This is more than just a history lesson. It's a revelation that will change how you see American history. On the shores of what is now Georgia, 1521. A Spanish explorer's hand shakes as he writes in his journal, his quill scratching frantically across the page. Before him stands a sight that challenges everything he believed about the New World. A Native American chief with skin as dark as night, leading a tribe of 1,000 warriors. The explorer's words reveal his confusion. These cannot be the savages we were told of, for they have built cities of stone, and their customs rival those of our greatest kingdoms. This was no isolated incident. From the icy waters of Alaska to the steamy jungles of Central America, over 100 distinct tribes of dark-skinned Native Americans built thriving civilizations. They weren't outcasts or anomalies. They were kings, queens, warriors, and scholars who ruled vast territories and developed advanced societies long before European contact. Take the Yamasee Nation of the Southeast. In 1687, English colonists documented their first encounter with these people. Their records describe a sophisticated civilization of 10,000 dark-skinned natives who had developed advanced agricultural systems, built permanent cities, and established trading networks spanning 3,000 miles across the continent. Yet today you won't find them in your history books. Why has this history been hidden? The truth lies buried in over 500 years of systematic erasure. When colonizers arrived, they didn't just face the challenge of conquest. They faced a reality that defied their entire worldview. Finding dark-skinned natives who had built empires rivaling European kingdoms didn't fit their narrative of racial superiority. The evidence isn't hidden in dusty archives or buried artifacts. It lives in the DNA of millions of Americans. Today, modern genetic studies reveal a shocking truth. Over 30% of African Americans carry Native American genetic markers, while 25% of self-identified Native Americans show significant African ancestry. These aren't just statistics. They're the biological proof of a history that was nearly erased. In the lush Mississippi Valley, the Wichita people thrived, creating a civilization that historians and researchers have long celebrated as evidence of Native American diversity. Their existence, documented through both indigenous records and European explorer accounts, challenges our traditional understanding of Native American appearance and culture. Modern science has unveiled even more compelling evidence. Genetic studies have revealed that native populations of the Americas possessed a remarkable diversity of traits. Their DNA contained a wide array of genetic markers, with many showing dominant characteristics typically associated with African populations. These scientific findings align perfectly with oral traditions that speak of ancient migrations and connections long predating European arrival. Why then were these dark-skinned Native Americans so rarely acknowledged in historical narratives? The answer lies in deliberate historical manipulation by colonial powers. Their strategy was simple but devastating. Divide and conquer through rigid racial categorization. These imposed categories erase the rich complexity of indigenous identities, particularly those of darker-skinned tribes, replacing vibrant, diverse histories with a simplified, one-dimensional narrative. Dark-skinned Native Americans were not anomalies or outliers. They were integral to America's indigenous culture, serving as leaders, warriors, healers, and civilization builders. Their story fundamentally connects to those we now call African Americans, though this connection has been systematically obscured. To truly understand this history, we must journey back through time, long before European colonization. The story begins in Africa, humanity's cradle, where scientists agree all modern humans originated over 100,000 years ago. From this starting point, successive waves of migration spread across the globe, carrying with them the seeds of human diversity that would shape all populations. Among these migrations were groups who reached the Americas through various routes. The most well-documented path is the Bering Land Bridge, a vast land connection between Siberia and Alaska. During the last ice age, this natural bridge enabled ancient peoples to cross into the Americas and gradually spread throughout the continents. But this represents only one chapter of a larger story. New evidence points to additional, less conventional migration routes that help explain the presence of dark-skinned Native Americans. The Olmec civilization of Mesoamerica, one of the earliest advanced societies in the region, flourishing around 12 BCE, provides intriguing evidence of these connections. The Olmec civilization left behind extraordinary evidence of potential African connections. Massive stone heads carved from volcanic basalt, each weighing several tons. These monumental sculptures, created around 12 BCE, display distinctive features that many historians and researchers link to African origins: broad noses, full lips, and elaborate headgear reminiscent of African styles. These remarkable artifacts raise profound questions about ancient contact between Africa and the Americas. The possibility of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact gains further support from maritime evidence. Ancient Egyptian records detail sophisticated reed boats capable of ocean navigation, constructed from tightly bound papyrus and sealed with natural resins. These vessels, according to nautical experts who studied the historical records, could withstand extended oceanic journeys when properly maintained. This technological capability suggests that ancient African mariners could have possessed the means to cross the Atlantic. The connections between African and Native American cultures run deeper than physical artifacts. Agricultural practices on both sides of the Atlantic reveal striking parallels. Both cultures developed sophisticated systems for cultivating maize, using similar irrigation techniques and crop rotation methods. Their architectural styles also share remarkable similarities. The step pyramids of ancient Mesoamerica echo designs found in ancient Nubia and Egypt. Spiritual practices provide even more compelling evidence of connection. The concept of the world tree appears in both African and pre-Columbian American spiritual traditions, representing a cosmic axis connecting the heavens, earth, and underworld. Both cultures also share similar ritual practices, including the use of sacred drums in ceremonies and the importance of cardinal directions in religious observations. The scientific evidence supporting these connections continues to grow. The discovery of Luzia, a 12,000-year-old skeleton in Brazil, challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about early Americans. Her skull features, including a narrow oval cranium and pronounced forehead, align closely with African populations, suggesting that early migrations to the Americas were far more diverse than previously understood. Modern genetic studies have begun to unravel this complex web of connections. While traditional theories emphasize East Asian ancestry for Native Americans, new DNA analysis has revealed genetic markers typically associated with African lineages. These findings, though controversial in some academic circles, align with the physical evidence and oral histories passed down through generations. Ancient trade networks likely played a crucial role in facilitating these connections. Archaeological evidence shows that sophisticated maritime trade routes existed long before European colonization. Artifacts found in the Americas include materials that could only have originated in Africa, suggesting regular contact and exchange between the continents. These trade relationships would have facilitated not just the exchange of goods, but also ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. Language provides another fascinating line of evidence. Linguistic researchers have documented remarkable similarities between West African languages and those of indigenous Caribbean peoples. These connections appear in basic vocabulary, grammatical structures, and even in the patterns of sound changes over time. The similarities are too specific and numerous to be mere coincidence, suggesting sustained contact between these populations. The diversity within Native American communities themselves tells a story of complex origins. From the Caribbean to the southeastern United States, indigenous people displayed a wide range of physical features that suggest multiple ancestral sources. This diversity appears to be the result of ancient migrations, environmental adaptations, and interactions between different populations over thousands of years. Oral traditions from both sides of the Atlantic Support these connections. Indigenous tribes across the Americas preserve stories of ancient visitors who arrived by sea, bringing new knowledge and technologies. African oral histories similarly speak of maritime expeditions to distant lands across the great waters. These narratives, long dismissed by Western historians as mere legends, are gaining new respect as archaeological and genetic evidence continues to support their essential truth. Despite mounting evidence from multiple fields, archaeology, genetics, linguistics, and cultural studies, the idea of ancient African connections to the Americas remains controversial in some academic circles. This resistance perhaps says more about modern preconceptions than it does about historical reality. The evidence continues to accumulate, suggesting that the history of the Americas is far more complex and interconnected than traditional narratives have acknowledged. While mainstream academia long resisted these emerging theories, new discoveries continue to challenge established narratives. The mounting evidence of connections between dark-skinned Native Americans and ancient African migrations forces us to fundamentally reimagine the history of the Americas. These aren't mere historical footnotes. They are crucial pieces of a complex puzzle that reveals the true identity of the American continents and their peoples. The arrival of European colonizers marked a devastating turning point for dark-skinned Native Americans. Colonization launched a calculated campaign to erase their presence and suppress their identities. This wasn't random circumstance. It was a deliberate strategy, deeply rooted in colonial ideology of racial hierarchy and control. Colonial powers arrived with a singular mission: to claim land resources and absolute dominance. To achieve this, they systematically dismantled indigenous societies and imposed their own rigid structures. Their most powerful weapon was the creation of strict racial categories designed specifically to divide and conquer. They established 3 rigid classifications: black, white, and native, leaving no room for the intricate identities that had existed for millennia in pre-colonial societies. Dark-skinned Native Americans, who didn't fit neatly into these artificial boxes, faced systematic erasure. The Spanish Empire implemented the casta system, a detailed racial classification scheme that meticulously categorized individuals based on their heritage. Under this system, dark-skinned Native Americans were routinely misclassified as African, stripping them of their indigenous status and relegating them to society's lowest ranks. The English colonies established similar practices. Their laws deliberately obscured distinctions between African-descended peoples and dark-skinned natives, leading to one of history's most tragic consequences: the enslavement of Native Americans with darker skin. Colonial records document countless instances where dark-skinned natives were captured, falsely labeled as African, and sold into bondage. This practice not only exploited their labor, but effectively erased their cultural and historical identities. The erasure campaign extended far beyond individuals. Colonial powers destroyed native artifacts, banned indigenous languages, and outlawed spiritual practices. Dark-skinned Native Americans, already marginalized by racial classifications, faced extraordinary challenges in preserving their traditions. European historians dismissed their oral histories as myths, creating historical gaps that persist today. Religion became another tool of suppression. Christian missionaries labeled indigenous beliefs as pagan and aggressively pushed for conversion. For dark-skinned natives, religious conversion carried an additional burden. Their physical appearance subjected them to the same prejudices faced by African-descended peoples. Colonial church records frequently listed dark-skinned natives as Negroes or mulattoes, further erasing their indigenous identity. As European settlement expanded westward, the systematic erasure of native peoples accelerated, leaving deep wounds in the fabric of American history. The erasure of dark-skinned Native Americans intensified through the blood quantum policies, a calculated system that defined Native identity based on parentage and ancestry. These policies specifically excluded individuals with African heritage from being recognized as indigenous, effectively erasing their native status with the stroke of a pen. This campaign of cultural destruction reached its peak in the 19th and 20th centuries through brutal assimilation policies. Government-run boarding schools operating under the chilling motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man," forcibly removed Native children from their families. Dark-skinned Native children faced particularly harsh treatment. Their appearance, making them targets for severe discipline and complete isolation from their communities and traditions. Yet, the spirit of resistance proved stronger than these oppressive policies. Within African American and Indigenous communities, oral histories preserved the truth of shared bloodlines, intermarriage, and cultural bonds. These stories, passed down through generations, became a form of quiet rebellion against the colonial narrative that tried to erase these connections. The intersection of Native and African American communities emerged as one of history's most powerful examples of cultural resistance and survival. During the darkest days of slavery, thousands of enslaved Africans found sanctuary among indigenous tribes. The Seminole, Creek, and Cherokee nations didn't just offer refuge. They welcomed these individuals into their communities, creating new and vibrant cultural traditions. The Black Seminoles stand as a testament to this cultural fusion. Escaping the brutal plantation system of the southern United States, they found more than just safety. Among the Seminole people of Florida, they found a new identity. While maintaining their African cultural heritage, they adopted Seminole customs and traditions, creating a unique hybrid culture that exemplified the resilience of both peoples. This alliance was forged in blood during the Seminole Wars, where Black and Native fighters stood shoulder to shoulder against U.S. forces, attempting to enforce slavery and displacement. Their shared resistance created unbreakable bonds, though these relationships faced severe tests when the U.S. government implemented the Indian Removal Act. This policy threatened not only Native tribes, but also the African-descended individuals who had found sanctuary among them. Today, researchers and activists work tirelessly to uncover and preserve records, artifacts, and stories that illuminate the history of dark-skinned Native Americans. Their efforts reveal not just the oppression these communities faced, but their extraordinary resilience and lasting influence on American culture. Though colonization attempted to erase their existence, their legacy endures through bloodlines, traditions, and the continuing bonds between Native and African American communities. The truth of this intertwined heritage, suppressed for centuries, now emerges with growing strength. Each recovered document, each preserved story, each family history passed down through generations adds another thread to this rich tapestry of American identity. The Americas have always been a crucible where cultures met and merged, creating new traditions and identities that transcended the rigid categories imposed by colonial powers. U.S. government treaties with Native tribes often contained hidden clauses targeting Black tribal members, forcing many back into slavery or stripping them of tribal rights. Yet despite these legal maneuvers, the cultural fusion between Native and African American communities flourished. Intermarriage created families that preserved and blended both heritages, developing rich new traditions that defied attempts at separation. This cultural intersection manifested powerfully through shared artistic expressions. The rhythmic drumming that echoes through both African and Native American ceremonies reveals ancient connections that survived centuries of oppression. In spiritual practices, both traditions shared deep reverence for ancestors and nature, leading to unique ceremonial rituals that combined African and indigenous elements. These shared ceremonies did more than build community. They became acts of resistance against cultural erasure. The Reconstruction era, after the Civil War, brought both opportunity and hardship. As formerly enslaved people rebuilt their lives, many reconnected with Native communities, strengthening long-standing cultural bonds. However, racism continued to create barriers. The Dawes Rolls, a federal land allotment initiative spanning the late 19th and early 20th centuries, forced individuals of mixed African and Native descent to make an impossible choice between their identities. Many found themselves classified as freedmen rather than tribal members, a designation that denied them land ownership and tribal benefits. This classification perpetuated economic inequality that persists to this day. Yet, even as these policies attempted to divide communities, cultural connections found new expression through art and literature. The Harlem Renaissance marked a pivotal moment of cultural fusion. Writers like Langston Hughes and musicians like Duke Ellington wove Native American influences into their work, creating art that reflected the complexity of their mixed heritage. This artistic revolution helped preserve and celebrate these dual identities, even as official policies tried to erase them. Today, this cultural intersection lives on in vibrant ways. Traditional POW incorporate African American influence, jazz rhythms and dance styles. Juneteenth celebrations honor the native tribes who sheltered and fought alongside escaped slaves. Modern descendants of these mixed communities carry forward a complex legacy, one marked by both pride in their ancestors, resilience, and awareness of the challenges they overcame. The fusion of Native and African American cultures stands as living proof that human connections can survive even the most determined efforts to sever them. Through ceremony and song, through story and celebration, these communities preserve their bonds, creating traditions that continue to enrich American culture today. Around the country, historians, researchers, and community leaders are working to uncover the forgotten stories of dark-skinned Native Americans. Their goal is simple but powerful: to restore chapters of American history that were deliberately erased. Through careful research of old documents, collection of family stories, and preservation of cultural practices, they're piecing together a history that challenges what most people learned in school. Standard history textbooks tell a limited story. Native Americans are portrayed as one uniform group, while Africans are shown only as slaves brought across the Atlantic. This version misses the rich diversity that existed long before European ships reached American shores. Archaeologists and historians have found evidence that paints a very different picture. In Virginia, researchers are studying the Great Dismal Swamp, where escaped slaves and Native Americans built hidden communities together. They've uncovered tools, housing remains, and everyday items that show how these groups lived together, shared knowledge, and protected each other from colonial authorities. Each artifact tells a story of cooperation and survival that history books left out. DNA testing has become another powerful tool for uncovering the truth. Many African Americans who take these tests discover significant Native American ancestry in their family lines. The scientific evidence supports the stories that grandparents and great-grandparents passed down through generations. Stories about Native American ancestors that historians often dismissed. These family stories passed down through generations have preserved crucial historical knowledge. Elders in both Native and African American communities tell tales of shared villages, intermarriage, and cultural mixing that happened long ago. These oral histories kept the truth alive, even when official records tried to erase it. Across the country, community groups organize workshops and gatherings where people can share their family histories and learn about this shared heritage. At universities, researchers are digging through old records, looking for evidence of these connections that went unrecorded in mainstream history books. Native American groups are working to document and preserve traditions that show African influences, while African American communities are reclaiming their Native ancestry. These efforts have revealed fascinating discoveries. For example, archaeologists have found African-style pottery in old Native American settlements and Native American farming techniques in communities built by escaped slaves. Language experts have identified words shared between Native American and African languages, suggesting long periods of contact and cultural exchange. The work continues today in libraries, universities, and community centers. Researchers examine old census records, property deeds, and church documents for evidence of these forgotten connections. They interview elders who remember stories passed down about Native American ancestors. Community groups organize events where people can share family photos, documents, and memories that help fill in the historical gaps. In museums, curators are creating new exhibits that show the true diversity of Native American peoples. They display artifacts that prove early connection between Native and African peoples, tools, artwork, and everyday items that show shared living spaces and cultural exchange. These exhibits help visitors understand that American history is far more complex than they were taught. Local history groups are marking important sites where Native and African American communities lived together. They're putting up historical markers, creating walking tours, and documenting oral histories from community elders. High schools and colleges are updating their history courses to include these newly uncovered stories. Education stands at the forefront of historical reclamation. Teachers across America are introducing new classroom materials that showcase dark-skinned Native Americans' contributions. From elementary schools to universities, students now learn about the complex relationships between Native and African American communities through updated textbooks, primary source documents, and oral histories. Museums have transformed their approach to telling these stories. The National Museum of the American in Washington, D.C., along with numerous local institutions, now features exhibitions specifically focused on the intersection of Native and African American histories. These exhibits display recovered artifacts like tools, clothing, and ceremonial items that show how these communities lived and worked together. Photographs from the 1800s and early 1900s provide visual evidence of these connections, while interactive displays help visitors understand the complexity of early American society. Social media and digital platforms have revolutionized how this history reaches the public. History professors share their research findings on YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of viewers. Native American and African American content creators produce documentary series exploring their shared heritage. Popular podcasts feature interviews with elders who share family stories passed down through generations. Policy advocates work with state education boards to reform school curricula. In several states, new standards now require teaching about dark-skinned Native Americans and their relationships with African American communities. These changes ensure students learn a more complete version of American history. Cultural revival takes many forms. In Oklahoma, descendants of both communities gather to learn traditional crafts like pottery and basket weaving, techniques that show influences from both Native and African traditions. Language preservation programs teach indigenous languages to new generations, while documenting words and phrases that reveal historical connections between Native and African peoples. Artists and writers bring these histories to life through their work. Painters create works showing scenes of shared communities from the 1700s and 1800s. Novelists write historical fiction based on documented cases of cooperation between Native and African American groups. Filmmakers produce documentaries featuring interviews with elders and historians, bringing scholarly research to wider audiences. Community celebrations provide living links to this shared heritage. Annual festivals in states like Florida, Oklahoma, and Virginia feature traditional music that shows the blending of Native and African influences. Dance performances demonstrate shared movement styles, while food festivals showcase cooking techniques preserved by both communities. These events attract thousands of visitors, educating the public while strengthening community bonds. Museums have created traveling exhibits that visit schools and community centers, bringing artifacts and historical documents directly to local communities. These exhibits often include items found at archaeological sites where Native and African Americans lived together, such as tools showing mixed cultural influences and documents proving shared land ownership. Libraries and historical societies have launched digitization projects, making old photographs, letters, and documents available online. These resources help families research their ancestry and provide evidence of historical connections between communities. Online databases now catalog thousands of documents that were previously hidden in archived collections. Through these varied efforts, the true story of dark-skinned Native Americans and their connections to African American communities is finally reaching a wider audience. This work goes beyond simply correcting historical records. It reshapes our understanding of early America and challenges long-held assumptions about racial separation in American history. Colonial powers created a rigid racial hierarchy that trapped mixed-race individuals in a legal and social limbo. Those with both African and Native American heritage found themselves denied basic rights from both communities, yet many dark-skinned Native Americans fought back by maintaining their ancestral traditions and identity. Despite intense pressure to abandon them, the colonizers' campaign to erase these histories went beyond simple discrimination. They systematically destroyed cultural records, rewrote histories, and criminalized efforts to preserve indigenous knowledge. While some European scholars documented indigenous cultures. Their records were filtered through a lens of superiority that portrayed native peoples as primitive and unworthy of preservation. This destruction had devastating consequences. Without written records, entire tribes, languages, and lineages vanished from official history. Their absence made it easier for authorities to claim these dark-skinned Native Americans never existed in significant numbers. As colonial settlements expanded, even the act of preserving these histories became criminalized, allowing colonizers to tighten their control. These practices continued long after the colonial era ended. When the United States formed, systemic racism shaped policies toward Native Americans, especially those with darker skin. In the Southeast, where many tribes had intermarried with enslaved Africans, unique mixed communities emerged. The U.S. government's one-drop rule declared that any person with African ancestry should be classified as black, erasing their native identity entirely. The Indian Removal Act of the 1830s forced thousands of Native Americans, including dark-skinned communities like the Seminoles, from their ancestral lands. Official records ignored these tribes, making their struggles nearly impossible to document. Dark-skinned Native Americans faced an impossible choice: abandon their heritage and assimilate, or be labeled as black and lose their tribal status. This forced categorization severed ancient family bonds and erased centuries of cultural heritage. Today, these communities still fight to reclaim their true history and identity. You've just learned about a crucial piece of American history that was hidden for centuries. If this story moved you, join our community at Native Legends and History Stories. Together we can ensure these voices are finally heard.